Throughout history, ordinary people have gone to extraordinary lengths to defend our rights to privacy, protest, and access to information. But how do we preserve these civil liberties in a digital age?
It's very important for us to fight back.
Text TRUTH to 77177 to join those who are exposing corruption, fighting abuses of power, and demanding transparency.
A 21st century movement born of outrage and modern technology.
You don't have a national Black Lives Matter movement at the scale that we do without social media.
And authorities are pushing back with a technical savvy of their own.
This should be concerning for everybody. This idea of dissuading dissent.
How deep is law enforcement surveillance of Black Lives Matter? And just why is the government watching this 21st century protest movement so closely?
To be seen as essentially domestic terrorists is alarming.
The birth and surveillance of hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Secretary Clinton has said that she would protect and enhance Social Security just this past week. That seems like pretty ambiguous.
A town hall meeting featuring presidential hopefuls Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley.
I don't know. This probably...
Dozens of protesters, mostly Black women, storm the room. They dominate the event and give speeches of their own.
Every single day, folks are dying. Not being able to take another breath. We are in a state of emergency.
It's an awkward and tense moment. This is a politically progressive event with politicians Black Lives Matter might ordinarily be aligned with.
Our message to the Democratic candidates was simple. We're in a state of emergency. If you don't have an agenda that's about Black folks, if you don't have an agenda that's really looking at the ways in which Black folks have been suffering for centuries in this country, then we're not going to vote for you.
1 week later in Cleveland, Black Lives Matter activists surround a police car attempting to take a young teen into custody for public intoxication. The activists demand the boy's release. As more officers arrive on the scene, pepper spray is used on the crowd. But the number of activists only grows. Finally, BLM organizers negotiate the boy's release to his mother's custody. It was a small victory in a larger struggle to change a system that Black Lives Matter believes unfairly targets African Americans. But BLM protesters had already become a major point of interest to law enforcement. Black Lives Matter was officially being watched.
We know that we've always been targets of the state, either violently or in terms of them using these methods to learn more about us and track us, but that doesn't deter us.
Soon after this interview, activist DeRay McKesson learned just how much he was being personally tracked. Documents provided through the Freedom of Information Act showed that the cybersecurity firm ZeroFox was watching him, assessing his influence, and then feeding that information to the city of Baltimore.
We've always had surveillance. Most of the time it's unwarranted. It's a violation of the Constitution. It's done to intimidate people and interfere with their right to assemble and free speech. That's certainly the case with Occupy, with Black Lives Matter. You know, what are you talking about? What has this got to do with terrorism or making the country safe? People forget that the Constitution extended these protections to people that the government wasn't going to like.
Okay, if you'll please publish the verdict.
This is the genesis of hashtag Black Lives Matter. 2 years earlier in Florida, George Zimmerman stands trial for the shooting death of unarmed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin.
We, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty.
The verdict sends shockwaves through Black America. In Oakland, California, Alicia Garza, a workers' rights activist, had spent the day monitoring the trial through social media.
We just could not fathom that this man could get away with killing a child. And he wasn't a police officer. He's just some random dude who wanted to be like Neighborhood Watch. That not guilty verdict changed something in my DNA.
Garza went on Facebook and posted her thoughts.
Black people, I love you. I love us. Our lives matter. Black lives matter.
It was an intervention I needed when Alicia wrote the love letter.
A few hundred miles away, prison reform activist Patrisse Cullors was also feeling the sting of the verdict. Looking to commiserate, she went online and saw Garza's post.
I saw the Black Lives Matter. I put a hashtag in front of it. It must have been intuition. And I knew that those 3 letters needed to be this generation's call. I mean, that's what I wanted it to be. And I very quickly, told Alicia, let's make this a project. Let's have it be all out online and offline organizing project for Black lives.
In Brooklyn, Opal Tometi, an immigrants' rights activist, was also acquainted with Alicia Garza.
I actually heard about this post that she had on Facebook, and I reached out to her directly and said, hey, this is brilliant. I really like what this says. I really like the hashtag, but I don't think it should just be amongst ourselves. I think we should actually build out a platform. So I went online, I bought a domain, I got Tumblr, I set up Facebook and all of those platforms, and I just said, let's just try it out and see where this goes. And it went viral. Because I have young Black people in my life, I wanted to build something that they can look to and be proud of, and to know truly that their life matters.
Just days after George Zimmerman's acquittal, Black Lives Matter is able to organize its first direct action protest. The target, a symbol of American wealth and leisure, Rodeo Drive.
This is where Black folks get stopped. This is where Black folks get frisked. So let's interrupt their eating.
If you can put your champagne down for a minute.
I got on the microphone and asked the people who were drinking that champagne to bow their heads to Trayvon Martin. And I thought that was the least they could do.
In the months to come, the ranks of Black Lives Matter swell as social media accounts and viral video footage show men and women in altercations with the police. All of these people died, either soon after or while in custody.
Jason Harrison, Eric Garner, John Crawford III, Kajemi Powell, Tamir Rice, Jeremy Reed, Charlie Kanang, Philip White, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Samuel DuBose. And there are more. There are many more.
Garza, Cullors, and Tometi would combine their expertise to form the nucleus of a loose network dedicated to nonviolent direct action protests. Their project for racial justice would soon impact the nation and attract the eyes of local and federal law enforcement.
When I wrote those posts, I didn't know what was coming.
Get us several more units over here. There's going to be a problem.
High noon on Canfield Drive, Officer Darren Wilson shoots and kills unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown. Brown's body lies in the street for several hours as traumatized residents look on, compare notes, and use smartphones.
I didn't get down there until maybe 9 p.m., and you could still see his blood in the street.
Earlier that day, Ashley Yates had been working at a St. Louis department store and checking her Twitter feed.
I logged on that day, and I saw a dead Black boy in the street, and then I saw that it was Ferguson, and then I saw that it was Ferguson, Missouri. Something immediately shifted in me, like the rage that was inside of me that day. I couldn't go home and sit with that.
Ashley is a force. I remember showing up to St. Louis and asking, where are the women? I know they're on the front lines. And I remember Ashley just having a fire that pierced through all of us.
You saw a community that was trying to hold each other, trying to understand not only what had happened with a young child getting murdered, but also the police response. You saw people that came outside, saw a dead body, and then had to face canine units just for saying, like, this dead boy shouldn't be laying in the street.
My son laying her life for no apparent reason because he walked to the store.
The notes that were being compared all said the exact same thing, and that was that boy was surrendering, that his hands were up. After hours of being ignored by the police, I realized, we have to do something more. The 50 or 60 people that we had out obviously weren't enough. We weren't doing something that would elicit a response.
Thank you for peacefully protesting. This is what it's about.
In the days that follow, peaceful protests are overshadowed by pockets of vandalism and looting.
This is a riot. This is a riot.
The unrest is met by a now militarized police force.
Hey, back up, back up, back up, back up. Hey, Erica, this way. This way, this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. They fucking throwing tear gas at us. Here they go. Fucking throw tear gas at us. Get back, get back, get back. Get back, get back. Don't shoot!
It definitely, for me, was a moment which I realized the power of, social media and Twitter and the immediacy of it and how people can meet that need.
Ashley Yates' Twitter profile reverberates around the world, but with that came disturbing consequences.
When I go to New York, and I'm from St. Louis, and a cop calls me Brown Blaze on the street. I was maybe at the protest for 5 minutes when a cop grabbed me by my arm and was like, Brown Blaze, get out the street. It was scary, but it was also like, well, I know exactly where, you're gaining your intel.
Law enforcement saw social media as an obvious way to track BLM, whose organizing strength relied so heavily on Facebook and especially Twitter.
Black Lives Matter has used Twitter really fantastically. I think it's become our news. We had information all the time. We knew what was going on. It makes all the difference.
Bloomington, Minnesota, December 2014. On the busiest shopping day of the year, thousands of Black Lives Matter protesters fill Mall of America, the largest shopping center in the country. Documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, including this photo, show that mall officials had tracked Black Lives Matter protesters using a fake Facebook account.
Every officer in there had a picture of me, and I had a disguise on, and they're staring at this piece of paper and staring at my face, and I'm sitting there but the energy, I have to say, it was magnetic.
FOIA documents show that both the city and mall colluded to sue selective activists for loss of income, including the cost of the private and public police force used to stop the event. After months in court, all charges were dismissed.
You're stopping people from shopping, which is stopping somebody from making money. On the biggest shopping day of the year, you have stopped capital from moving. They do not like that.
For many involved with Black Lives Matter, the technology might be new, but surveillance of civil rights groups in the United States has a long history.
The FBI, under a program called COINTELPRO, created at the behest of J. Edgar Hoover, was designed to stall the civil rights movement and to cause it to unravel.
Under COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, racial justice organizations were infiltrated by informants, provocateurs, and undercover police. Some leaders were framed and murdered.
Surveillance was the go-to tactic. Who's meeting? What are they planning to do? What has happened to that sensibility, the desire to destroy? Has it been policed out of existence? Has it been dismantled and deconstructed, or does it still exist? Imagine how it is possible now when much of the organizing is over the internet.
We have precedent. We have reason to be nervous and to be fearful for the lives and the livelihood of the people who are really putting themselves on the front line to do this work.
As Homeland Security sets its sights on Black Lives Matter, the agency has at its disposal an increasingly advanced and secretive structure of surveillance.
Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. Well, we have now a militarized intelligence complex. And you do have to ask about their motives. When they go after a Black Lives movement, or they go after Occupy or anything else.
State power knows how to respond to an insurgency that they've seen before. Using the internet, it's coming in a new way. And of course, the repression is gonna come, in a new way as well.
In the wake of 9/11, centers of surveillance were erected in cities and towns across the United States. Largely a creation of Homeland Security, these centers were designed to combat terrorism by collecting surveillance data feeds from cameras and other assets. In Los Angeles, it's called the Real-Time Critical Response Division. In Chicago, it's the Crime Prevention Information Center. In New York, it's simply called Ring of Steel.
I assume that they're monitoring my email, my phone calls, my locations, and who I'm with at whatever point in time. Yeah, absolutely.
In 2013, Oakland, California rolled out its Domain Awareness Center. The DAC would be the hub of a more massive system of surveillance with the most sophisticated technology. That included automatic license plate readers, heat and motion detectors, and possibly even facial recognition software. To make all this happen, the City of Oakland chose the Services of Science Applications International Corporation. SAIC is a defense contractor with a long history of unscrupulous dealings, from defrauding municipal governments to helping enable nations known for their human rights violations. The system agrees to sit down for an interview.
As technology keeps emerging, well, then you'll want a place where there's a central conduit for that information to go.
Chief Downing unapologetically uses social media to watch groups like Black Lives Matter.
Yes, we use social media just like everybody else because it's open source. It's absolutely, completely open to the public. We are part of the public. We monitor all groups.
The technology is effective as a surveillance tool to identify and then intimidate people who are daring to protest.
This should be concerning for everybody, this practice of dissuading dissent.
Black Lives Matter takes its cues from social justice movements of the past, and they're particularly aware of the role surveillance and infiltration played in the demise of some of those movements.
We're in the 21st century. Technology has evolved. The methods and mechanisms for surveillance and infiltration have also evolved. And so I don't doubt it for a minute that that is happening to us too.
At a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Oakland, 2 undercover highway patrol officers are outed by protesters. The situation gets dangerous. During a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Chicago, an emergency management vehicle rides parallel to the demonstrators. Activists say their cell phones behave oddly and speculate in real time that the SUV is carrying a cell phone data collection device called a Stingray. Documents suggest Chicago police began buying controversial Stingrays in 2005. This intercepted police audio suggests a Stingray was being used to spy on a BLM organizer during a Black Friday protest 1 week earlier.
One of the girls is kind of an organizer here. She's been on her phone a lot. You guys picking up any information where they're going, possibly? Yeah, we're keeping an eye on it. We'll let you know if we hear anything.
But the scrutiny of BLM is not only covert. After a police officer is shot and killed at a gas station in Houston, Texas, police blame Black Lives Matter. They point to some rallies and a slogan used at a protest.
Some of the vulgar, vile, vicious rhetoric that's coming out, talking about killing cops.
I don't know whether this crew, Black Lives Matter, have any constituency other than the radical left.
The right is trying to attack us, smearing our names. All these right-wing bloggers are doing the same, so that's also a tactic.
During a BLM demonstration in Minneapolis, several suspicious-looking men are identified in the crowd. One of them pulls a gun and opens fire. 5 demonstrators are injured.
It's scary, and it's hard to know what to do with entities that are so much bigger than us, right? We don't have the same type of technology. What we do have is our organizing skills, social media. That's this generation's ability to bring about our narrative.
For me, the way that I make it through is just remembering why I'm here and remembering that I'm not the first or the last. And it's not fun. It's not glamorous. It's not cute. It's taxing, but it's necessary.
We're doing, social justice work. We're sharing where we're going. We know that we're right to do this work.
Using social media and direct action protests, Black Lives Matter forced the issue of racial inequality back into the political arena.
Now we have people from across the world connecting one another. When Palestine started tweeting to Ferguson protesters how to deal with tear gas, that is how oppressed people start to link up. That is true power.
I think anytime that an attempt at changing the world relies so heavily on the internet, there is the possibility that people will simply lose interest and walk away.
We hope that 5 years from now, that there will still be a vibrant, active movement that is pushing for our basic humanity. I don't think that goes out of style.
Trying to change the rules of how society works, particularly for racially marginalized groups, has never been a fair struggle. It's never been one about, can you convince us? It's always been, can one get the word out before you are completely taken offline?